Hey, Candace.
Hi, friends. Hey, Samantha and Jane. I see you have the opportunity to meet our new Deputy Director, Jenna. So I just want to introduce you to her before the meeting starts.
Thank you. It's wonderful to meet you, Jenna.
Yes, thank you.
Nice
It's
to
good to meet
meet
you as
you.
well. Yes, I'm
Very
glad
happy
to
to
be
have you
here.
on board.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And
I'm so glad to
Jane.
be here. Hi, Mika. Hi, Will.
Hello, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Hope y'all are doing well.
Hanging in there. Hope the same for you all.
Yes. Y'all have to bear with my voice a little bit today if I sound creaky. I feel fine. I'm just getting over a cold, so pardon me if my voice breaks a little. We'll give it just another minute or two. I think a couple of people had tried to log on to the Teams link, so we'll make sure we give them a chance to log into WebEx. Hey, Leanna.
Hey,
How you doing?
doing well. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
It looked like I received a notification. It looks like Senator Heiss joined on the Teams link. Someone may want to.
Yeah,
I
I think
went
Samantha had
I went
already
over
chatted
there
with.
and asked him to move over to WebEx, but I don't know if he's joined here yet, and I can't see anymore because my screen has to be
Yeah.
full to share the PowerPoint. So if anyone else is able to forward the meeting invitation to his email, that would be awesome.
I
He's
think
right
he's
there.
here. Hi,
Oh,
Senator
okay, great.
Heiss. Hey, Neil, Madhu, Lori. Got lots of people joining. Thank y'all. I think there's a few more people we're expecting, but we can go ahead and get started. Hey, Erica, I see you joined. I think we've got quite a few. We are already live streaming, but just wanted to share that with you all. I'm Kimberly Malady, Senior Policy Advisor at the Division of Child Development and Early Education. Happy to be here facilitating this call with you. Jane Chuley at the department is also helping out, and Nicole Boone from our division as well. So you can go to the next slide. So we have just a few housekeeping items to go over initially, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time hearing about the True Cost of Care research brief that Leanna Martin and Neil Harrington of NC Child have prepared for you all. We want to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions, get some answers, and this brief is directly related to the first recommendation that this work group is tasked with, which is creating the statewide subsidy floor. And then at the very end, we'll just talk about a few next steps in our upcoming meeting on December 1st. Go to the next slide. Before we get started, I just wanted to review some policies and procedures. Please be advised that state public records policy applies to this work group as well as to the larger task force. And this means that the meeting recording, as well as notes produced from the meeting, are a matter of the public record. If you're a work group member who is not a state employee and you need to complete a public records training, please reach out and just let us know. We can help schedule that for you. Go to the next slide. Also want to share a reminder that the meetings of the task force and its work groups are public meetings. Notices for these meetings are available online at the North Carolina Secretary of State's Office Public Meetings calendar. Today's meeting is open to the public via live stream, and that's through the North Carolina Department of Commerce's YouTube channel. Thank y'all for hosting this. Work group members, please be advised that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. And then finally, I'll read aloud our conflict of interest disclosure, which is also read aloud at the top of each task force meeting. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every committee member to avoid both conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest. If any committee member has any known conflict of interest or is aware of facts that might create the appearance of such conflict with respect to any matters coming before the committee today, please identify the conflict or the facts that might create the appearance of a conflict to ensure that any inappropriate participation in that matter may be avoided. If at any time any new matter raises a conflict during the meeting, please be sure to identify it at that time. Do any work group members have any conflicts to share at this time? Great. We'll go ahead and move into the rest of our agenda. Do you want to remind you of our work group purpose? And so we are looking at policy solutions, developing recommendations, issuing reports, specifically around implementation planning for the recommendations that were in our interim report from the task force. So we are looking at how recommendations can be achieved, who should be at the table, and what resources will be required. We'll go to the next slide. This work group follows the same guiding principles as the task force. We're looking for continuous progress, solutions-based approaches, and public and private solutions. We are working toward that next report deadline is due December 31st. And so the implementation plans will reflect all of the work that you all have done between August and now, and that will be included in that report. I just want to note that if there are any future task force recommendations related to finance and funding, this work group may address those as well. And then I'm going to turn it over to Miss Leanna Martin and Mr. Neil Harrington of NC Child. They have worked really hard to draft a research brief for you all around creating a statewide floor for childcare subsidy reimbursement rates. It is titled A Roadmap to the True Cost of Childcare. And this was developed to address some key questions and considerations that we initially discussed back in August when our work group first formed. So as we review this together, they will be happy to answer your questions. And then I just want you to consider during our discussion how this brief may shape your work group implementation plan for this recommendation and what we can be putting in that implementation plan. And so I will shift it to the brief. I think Samantha has that up, and to Leanna and Neil, and I will be back later.
Well, just wanted to start off and thank you all for having Neil and I come today and talk about this brief, and a special thanks to DCDE for their partnership on this. So just a little bit of background. We've been talking about it for the past few months, but we understand the conundrum that childcare is currently in. In August, 47 programs closed, while only 22 open. Closures were at double the rate that they were opening. And anecdotally, I'm working on my dissertation, and when I started back in May, there were 485 programs in Wake County, and as I was pulling some sample data yesterday, there are 468. And so we're seeing this across the state. And again, with the recommendation of a statewide subsidy floor and conversations that we have talked about, understanding what would be those economic impacts throughout the planning of getting to the true cost of care. And so Neil and I have been working diligently on trying to find what would that look like to have a phased incremental approach that still has impact across the state. And so Samantha, if you want to go to page 6 on the report, I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology before we get into the full recommendation. So this was adapted through the alternative market rate study that was published in 2023, December 2023, by the American Institutes for Research. But there are some very important caveats to think about As we've heard multiple times, the true cost of care to reach that is a $1.3 billion investment. And as you'll see, our analysis is significantly lower than that. But I want to talk through those caveats before we get into the recommendation. What we have done in this study, as opposed to what was done in the AIR study, we accounted for the $552 million that is already invested into the child care subsidy program. And all the costs that are outlined in this solely reflect those additional investments that are needed. In addition, these investments the scope of this is from infants through 5-year-olds. The reason being for this is we wanted to start with a baseline figure and estimate, and infants through 5-year-olds make up roughly 75% of total enrollment in any given month. And so that was important for us to note that and understand that future iterations of this report would include school-age children. And the estimates account for current enrollment. So when the AIR study was presented and developed, there were about 8,000 more children in the subsidy program. And enrollment in that program has declined by over 8,000 children in the past year and a half. And so that makes the cost significantly lower than previous reports. And this model at this moment does not account for the inclusion of additional slots to reduce those wait lists. This is solely for increasing the investment on the current slots funded. An additional note that is not in the methodology, but we wanted to bring up is when the AIR study came out in December 2023, the additional the additional adjustment to go from the 2018 to the 2021 market rate study had not been included. And so since that has already been passed, that is an additional investment. And it's important to note that as we continue to build out this report and as these steps are reached, inflation will be used for adjustment. So we have already adjusted to the 2025 CPI for this study based on the 2023 AIR study. But as those steps are completed, there would be additional adjustments needed. And it's important to note that each step is iterative. So you cannot jump to the true cost of care of the 50 million that we will talk about without going through steps 1 through 3 first. And so our economic impacts reflect that iterative approach as well. So Samantha, you can scroll to page 7. So our recommendation is to implement a phased approach to align subsidy rates with the true cost of care. And so where we're at right now is the 2021 market rate across the board. And there are 4 steps to this. The first is an alignment with current funding appropriations proposed of the 80 million, so 77 million to do a 2021 subsidy floor for infants and toddlers with the 2023 market rate for 3 to 5-year-olds with hold harmless policies. The second approach would be to phase that to 3 to 5-year-olds for the floor, then increase the floor rate in step 3 to the 2023 market rate, and then to achieve the true cost of care. For a total investment to get to the true cost of care for 0 to 5-year-olds of $230 million. So want to go ahead and start with step 1 on page 8. So the reason that we're starting with infant and toddler care is we know that's the most expensive to provide and the least available throughout the state. And that is even more pronounced in our rural communities. And subsidy and reimbursements for this age group are far below what programs spend to serve. And current rates, the average current rate is less than 50% of the true cost of care. So truly programs that do take subsidy vouchers for infants and toddlers are hitting a deficit with that less than 49%, with that 50%. By establishing the floor at the 2021 rate, this would address the largest deficit in childcare across the state. And it directly benefits the families and the economy. In addition, this would have an increase for 3 to 5-year-olds. as providers currently receive the 2021 market rate for this age group. So what this would do, just the initial impact of this, this would increase from less than 50% to almost 65% of the true cost of care with a rate floor for infants and toddlers. And 95 of our counties currently have rates that are below the floor, and 92 have toddler rates that are below the floor. So this would increase all of those counties as well. And to compare this with the 2023 market rate study that was originally put in the House and Senate budget proposals, there's a few important caveats that you can start seeing a little bit on page 10 of the report. First of all, this proposal would get floor language into the budget, which is really important as we are starting to build that, and that is, the primary recommendation. And it more effectively distributes the funding to the rural communities. So compared to the 2023 market rate study, this proposal would increase, would have rural providers receiving $15 million more than they would receive with the 2023 market rate alone. In addition, 56 rural communities would see more investment. And this is also important because 77% of Western North Carolina, their subsidy enrollment is for 0 to 5-year-olds. Before we go into step 2, and we will stop through each part to have any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Neil to talk more about the economic impact.
Yeah, thank you, Leanna. Before that, Samantha, could you scroll down just one page? Thank you. So this chart kind of shows rate levels for each county at the 2021 current county market rates for 5-star centers serving infants. So that top panel, right, is infant rates. Each of those purple dots represents the county's market rate with the 2021 market rate study. So that's 95 counties that are below that gray dotted line, which is the floor amount, which is what they would receive under this kind of proposal. And the same chart below is for toddler rates. So for two-year-old rates, you can see that about 92 counties currently have market rates that are below what would be the floor rate with the 2021 rate floor for 0 to 2-year-olds. So I wanted just to kind of highlight that. And the counties in orange, the orange dots above the floor amount, their current levels are above the floor amount in the 2021 rate, but we kind of factored in a hold harmless clause into this and all these cost estimates. So those counties that have rates that are currently above the floor amount would see their rates increase to the 2023 market rates, so that all counties are still, providers in all counties are still receiving the highest rate that they could receive under this kind of rate structure. So Samantha, if you could just scroll down, I think it's just one more page. We did do, I guess I'll cover this chart first before too, but this chart shows kind of the increased investment to child care providers under this first step. So a 2021 rate floor for infants and toddlers, then a 2023 market rate increase for 3 to 5-year-olds. And you can see that about rural counties would see an increase of about $27 million with this rate structure. So the shading of these counties represents, a darker shade of purple represents a higher level of subsidy investment into providers in that county. And we also kind of went a step further on the next page, shows we basically took, let's scroll down one more actually, Samantha, to the chart. We took that $77 million that would be provided to providers, childcare providers in those counties, and plugged it into, worked with the Department of Commerce's Labor and Economic Analysis Division to plug this into what's called INPLAN. It's an input-output economic impact analysis model. So it looks at, okay, if we put X amount of dollars into an industry, in this case, the childcare industry, what is the added economic impact that will have throughout the rest of the economy? So the results from that INPLAN analysis found that this first step, adding that $80 million into the subsidy system, would generate an additional $82.5 million in economic activity and increase of the state's GDP from that investment. We broke the chart breaks it down by sub-prosperity zone in North Carolina. So these are groups of counties that have interrelated labor markets and kind of economies. And you can see the GDP increase, the number of childcare jobs created, the impact on personal income, and the impact on total job creation from that $80 million investment. So right, I mentioned the 82.5 million GDP increase, but this $80 million increase would also generate about 1,000 new jobs in childcare, in the childcare industry itself. It would generate about another 300 jobs across the larger economy in other industries from the increased economic activity that childcare providers themselves would be generating from buying goods and services that they rely on as inputs into their business. So a lot of that is labor costs, but you also have other kind of materials and goods that providers are buying within their local economies to provide high quality services to kids. And we did this for the first 3 steps as economic impact analysis, and it's cumulative. So I'll come back to, after Leanna goes over step 2, I'll kind of come back to the next one.
Excellent. And I just want to take a moment before we go through, if there are any questions before we go into step 2, or if you all prefer to have questions at the end.
I apologize, Leanna and Neil, for being late, and to everyone, do we have this report? I've tried a few direct chats, but I think people haven't seen me.
I attached it to the WebEx invite this morning, but I did just email it to all of you as well, just in case you didn't see it on the invite. Yes. So hopefully you got that.
Got it. Yes, just now. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you.
And I guess I should note too, because I think I forgot to mention this at the beginning, that this roadmap focuses on the 0 to 5 age range for the reason that Leanna said, that about 75% of subsidy enrollment is in those earliest years age range. We were going to work to add school age to that as well, but want to acknowledge that even for centers that do have school age enrollment, which not every center does, but even those that do, like YMCA's or what have you, a lot of those centers are serving 0 to 5-year-old children too. So this doesn't mean that the school age, the centers serving school age children are left out of this proposal. It just means that we're just focusing dollars into the age ranges that have kind of the most need, or they're serving the most children. As Leanna mentioned at the top, that kind of more effectively distributes money across the state to rural providers a lot more kind of efficiently than what a larger market rate increase across the whole age band would. But I'll have to say, we do recognize that we'll kind of come back and add the school age components to it after that as well.
Excellent. So I will just continue. And again, we will have plenty of time, any questions that you all have. So step 2 would be to extend the same protection to 3 through 5-year-olds by implementing the 2021 subsidy floor. And this is on page 13. So yeah, if we just scroll 1. So this cost would be $36 million. And again, as a reminder, this is iterative. So, if it was chosen to do steps 1 and 2 together, understanding what that total cost would be. But what this does is this would establish reimbursement rates that are closer to the true cost of care for 3 to 5-year-olds. As you see in the impact chart, when you establish it for a 5-star facility, the floor rate for 3 to 5-year-olds, it gets you right at that true cost of care. In addition, once it is established, once the floor is established for 0 to 5-year-olds, the floor rates would get you incredibly close to the true cost of care for all family child care homes as well. And so I will then pass it back to Neil. We're just going to keep jumping back and forth to talk about the economic impact of the second iteration on page 14.
Yeah, so like the kind of roadmap itself, this economic impact is cumulative. So this on step 2, the GDP increase and the impact on childcare jobs created, the impact on personal income, and the impact on total jobs created is considering the total impact from taking step 1 and step 2. So you can see, right, that you'd see about $120 million increase in GDP across the state from putting about $126 million into the child care subsidy system, and that would create about 1,500 jobs in the child care sector itself. And if you were to break it down by sub-prosperity zone, right, you would see in the Western North Carolina sub-prosperity zones, you'd see about 200 childcare jobs created in that region. And then in the Eastern North Carolina sub-prosperity zones, you would see about 550 childcare jobs created from these first 2 steps in the roadmap.
And so moving on to step 3 on page 15. So it's to increase the subsidy floor then at that point to the 2023 market rate study. So once the floor has been established and we can kind of see the impacts of that from the 2021 floor, then it would be to elevate to the most recent market rate study, understanding that the 2025 market rate study is currently going on, and we do not have those numbers. So establishing a subsidy floor at this would be more reflective of the increased labor and materials cost that we have seen, especially in the past couple of years. And yes, it's still tethered to the market, but this helps cover current expenses from rising labor costs of food and supplies. And understanding that it is not mandatory that programs accept child care subsidy. This will further incentivize providers to accept the reimbursement, particularly in those rural communities where current reimbursements are not reflective of the cost. The cost of this part of the iteration of the roadmap is $67 million. And what would be achieved for an infant 5-star centers would be nearly 75% of the true cost of care. So the floor level would be at $1,595, where the true cost of care based on inflation is $2,177. So we're looking at from where we're at now to where this would be an almost $550 increase. And so this would not only stabilize those programs, it could also incentivize as well. And so back to Neil on the economic impact of it.
Yes, so this is the 3rd step, right after taking steps 1, 2, and 3. And that kind of equates to, almost $200 million that you're putting into the subsidy system from those first 3 steps. You would see, the in-plan analysis shows that you would see an increase of GDP of roughly $190 million across the state. That would create nearly 2,500 childcare jobs across North Carolina, and also increase personal income by almost $130 million and create 3,200 jobs across the entire economy in all sectors and all industries. And as you can kind of see in the text above the chart, right, that GDP increase from those first 3 steps, that total investment would create about 330 childcare jobs in Western North Carolina sub-prosperity zones alone, and almost 1,000 new jobs in childcare in Eastern North Carolina sub-prosperity zones. And I think the point you just hammer home, right, is that by increasing subsidy investments, you are providing providers with reimbursements closer to the true cost of care for children that they're already serving, and that allows them to reinvest that money into their programs to hire new staff, and that new staff in turn kind of allows providers to serve more private paying parents. So you're able to expand private paying capacity by increasing subsidy reimbursement rates. There's been some studies, one out of the Upjohn Institute, which is a kind of a labor market economic analysis think tank, In Michigan, they found that for every $100 increase in childcare subsidies in Minnesota, that led to about a 4% increase in private paying in licensed capacity for private paying parents. That's something that Leanna and I hope to replicate with North Carolina data over the next several months to really try to understand how these investments in the subsidy system are translating into larger capacity for kids on subsidy, but also kids that are in families that are paying for childcare privately.
And then in the final step, and Neil's already highlighted just a little bit, but in the final step, and then to talk about a couple of considerations as well. So the final step would be to increase the subsidy reimbursements to reflect the true cost of care. And so this is shifting away from what families can afford to what the cost truly is. And again, as we get closer to that, we would run an in-plan analysis as well. But Neil noted with the in-plan study or with the Upjohn study, seeing that increase in access for private paying parents, as well as understanding and the empowering work report that we did last year, that when there's a more accessible childcare system, and funding subsidies is a large part of that, it could create more jobs in the state and increase GDP. And we also cited some research through Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center in Virginia that increasing subsidy investment had a stabilizing effect on the system and positive economic impact because it made it easier for programs to stay open, for teachers to stay in the field because they were able to reinvest that into the workforce, and parents were able to rely on childcare for work. And so again, as we get closer to that, we would be happy to run that as well. So just a couple of considerations when looking through this. Again, we've talked about the cost estimates for infants to 5. These reflect the latest market rate studies and enrollment data, understanding how recent legislation could impact current estimates, thinking about just different things, as well as the 2025 market rate study could impact these current figures. As Neil noted, costs are estimated using blanket hold harmless policies. So if the estimated market rate is higher, counties receive the higher of the 2 rates. And this is important as this hold harmless actually impacts about less than 10% of North Carolina counties. And we did want to know, and we have talked with DCDEE extensively about this, that it does, through an incremental approach, it does increase administrative burden to make sure that the numbers are updated through the NC FAST system. And it's important to note that that coordination between the DCDEE and NC FAST on that. But we, again, as an additional note, NC Child is happy and honored to partner with you all. And any evaluation of the implementation, as should this move forward as a recommendation, to study each step of the process through qualitative interviews and impact analysis as well. But that's the brief. Happy to take any questions.
It is so impressive. So I just want to quickly get off mute to say thank you so much for it. Trying to keep up with it. Again, sorry to be late. And that last note, could you tell me just a little bit more on it, as I was forwarding to our subsidy guru here at NCPC, and as they work with you all at DCD on NC FAST, on other platforms, and ensuring administrative burden is kept low as we play the role of the match for the federal subsidy drawdown, and need to understand it. I can imagine someone else will have those questions and understand it better than I do in the network. So I want to
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were talking about knowing that this is kind of an incremental approach, we talked closely with Elizabeth Hayes from DCDEE to understand what is the level of the administrative burden. And as we were asked to do this, we wanted to lay out what all the considerations were. But it's essentially just making sure that the floor spreadsheet would be up to date as each approach goes through, and then just making sure that the coordination was there. To my understanding, and Neil, Kimberly, anyone from DCDE, please feel free. Elizabeth seemed to think that this was very doable, but it was just something we wanted to make sure to know, just as we went through.
Jump in, Leanna.
Mhm.
It's Candace. Yes, we can do it. I think what Elizabeth was trying to express is that we would just need a timeline. Like it's not something that could be implemented overnight because currently NC Fast does not pay on two different formulas, right? We would essentially have to reprogram the system to pay one formula for one age group and a different formula for another age group. And so there need to be some time there for us to just program the system to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Candace, for that.
What do you see as being the impact on federal block grant funds? I know you had said you'd held the number of slots consistent, but obviously as you increase rates, your block grants will cover fewer slots. Are we picking those up as a whole in this estimate, or is it just holding consistent to the state slots?
Yeah, it's holding consistent for the number of slots that are currently enrolled in the subsidy system. So we would want to kind of, if you take an incremental approach, right, and a stepped approach, we would want to kind of re-estimate each step, the cost of it before you take it. So we're using the most recent enrollment data, so that you aren't inadvertently adding more money and serving less kids, but you have an idea of the amount of money needed to serve the same amount of kids in the system right now.
This is Beth. I just would want to join in with all the folks saying what a tremendous amount of work you all have done here. This is really impressive, and appreciate all that y'all have poured into this. And I think it's really important that we as a state begin to move towards the true cost of care, because otherwise it feels like we're moving towards a target, but we're not really clear altogether on what that target is. And I feel like, having a place that we're standing against, a goal that we're setting against a benchmark is really critical. So I very much appreciate that. And laying out the incremental steps. I think the only thing I want to flag, and I know you all have spoken about it before and we've talked about it offline, is that I do have concerns about waiting, pushing 6 to 12-year-olds to the end, or waiting to get that figure included in there, because the parents I hear from don't differentiate childcare. They still need childcare to be able to go to work if they have a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old who also can't be left home alone. And so I hope that we can find ways, I know you all are going to be working on that analysis, and that we can get that included. But that we can think, as we think about the increments, I know that many of those programs are also hanging on by a thread as well. And so I just feel the need to lift that up, because the same challenges that apply for a family to be able to go to work and be part of the economy and have access to childcare exist for 6 to 12-year-olds as well. And I know you all know that, and we talked about it, but I just felt like I needed to flag that here as well. But thank you so much for the work. It's really, really impressive and inspiring for our work together.
Beth, I want to jump in because I think that was a beautiful segue. And yes, Leanna, Neil, like NC Talk, this document, this brief is amazing. It is so impressive, especially when you look and can see the economic impact of the investment in early ed. And I just want to remind the task force, this group, that this is just one recommendation, right? And we as a task force can make whatever recommendation we feel we need. So if you recall the very first meeting we had, I shared with the whole group about an $80 million number for the 2023 market rates across all ages, and then a $217 million $217 million investment to establish a state floor on the 2023 rates. And then Neil and Leanna have some information in here about the gap of what it would take us to get to the true cost of care, kind of bringing in Senator Heiss's recommendation. So I think as a task force, we are not necessarily obligated to stay within that $80 million range. I think we can say that, we would like to establish that floor. And what would that cost to establish that floor at this point? Would it be 145 million? Like, I feel like we have the responsibility to make a recommendation about what we think would be best for North Carolina and for the children. And then from there, the decision makers, the legislators, that they can determine how they respond to that recommendation and how much of that is doable. And I think we owe it to them to paint the entire picture, to say an $80 million investment will get you this, a $145 million investment will get you this, a 200 and whatever million dollar investment will get you this, so that we can paint a clear picture of what they get, who is included, who is not included, so that they can make an informed decision.
One other question I'm kind of getting at as we get to the end of this, I know that I believe the market rate study has some federal implications as to we started it, and then I think the feds mandated it back across the ground. But do we see at the end of this a funding model not based on a rate study, but based on a percentage of total cost of care? And what are the implications? And I think we're seeing, kind of 3 rate payments, 0 to 3 to 5 and 6 to 12. Is that kind of the end goal, is we would have 3 payments?
So yes, the ultimate goal is that we transition from market rate to an alternate reimbursement study, which is what we did with AIR. And that recommendation takes us from over 3,000 reimbursement rates to 21. So it's not 3, which I would love that, but it's still much simpler, and it's just based on age, star, and facility type. So if it's a home or a center.
Is there any proposed changes to the STAR system that we're looking at as well, remaining that at 5 stars with the same?
It takes into account the stars already into that 21 reimbursement, the 21 reimbursement rates.
And just, Candace, just in terms of the federal implications, this is an option. Other southern states have done it. It wouldn't be a problem for us to be basing it against true market, true cost of care, correct?
Correct. We would just have to apply, like we would have to explain to our federal partners what we are doing. And there are some other things within that the division will have to make sure still happens, as far as like surveys. We can base it off an alternative market rate, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have to let the feds know like what our narrow cost analysis are, what the market rates are, so that they can make sure that what we're paying is sufficient. But we would not be obligated to pay based off of those as long as we have a clear alternate market rate.
Neil and Leanne, hi, this is Mika with the Duke Endowment. Thank you again for this work. When I read implementing this type of work over a phased approach, I think about timing. And I just wondered if you all, I don't see it in here, but and I'm sorry if I've missed it, but what is your kind of sense on the timing of these phases, and in terms of in the context of your recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can kind of speak a little general. I don't I don't have the magic 8 ball, or I can't see exactly what would be into the future. But the idea behind what Neil and I've kind of mapped out is understanding that programs right now are struggling right now. We know that programs are closing. We hear about it. Again, and this may be a point of personal privilege. I'm reading about it every day. I'm analyzing it, and so we wanted to create a first step that really fell in line with and understanding exactly what Candace said. The task force has the opportunity to really kind of build out what we have drafted, but what can we do right now within the next couple of months, and understanding that step one really kind of falls within the proposals, but just reassesses how that could be worked out so that we can get our rural communities um, you know stabilize might be a strong word, but we're getting there. We're getting close to it. We outlined in the report that Western North Carolina in October alone lost 117 subsidized slots, and we saw 167 slots in general close. And so there are counties at this point that do not have infant toddler care, and that's something to really understand. And so phase one, step one would be something that we would love to see kind of push through over the next few months, as budget negotiations continue on. With step two really being seen as how quickly can we do an economic impact analysis of that, do a qualitative and quantitative study to get that floor for 0 to 5 as soon as possible. Then looking at maybe, depending on where we're at, depending on where budget negotiations go, looking at the 2023 floor rate within the 2027 long session, and then moving forward from there. But it looked like Erica was coming off mute, so I did also want to open it up if she wanted to speak on that.
Yeah, and Leanna, I think you did an excellent job of answering that. I just wanted to add one kind of additional note. A lot of why we're trying to break it down where it can be really incrementally done over time is because we're trying to be very cognizant of what's going on at the state level in terms of the budget, to which point I would completely defer to Senator Heiss. But I think in for NC Child, we would love to see all of this happen tomorrow, right? So we just are very understand that is not a realistic request, and so that goes back to phasing it out to where we can make sure each step is having that impact and so on and so forth. But I just want to name that. I feel like I'm not doing my job if I'm not also naming that. So
So just a couple questions. Wondering if there are any takeaways that you want us to reflect in your implementation plan regarding this statewide floor. And then I'm sure Leanna and Neil would wonder if there's something else you think would be important to address in this brief that maybe needs a little more information. Any kind of input that you have, we would appreciate.
Kimberly, could you clarify a little bit more about like what you're asking in terms of us actions to take this morning, what you're hoping to get from us? Because I'm struggling there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so as a work group, you guys will, we are drafting for you an implementation plan around each of these recommendations. So today, with this, is there something in this brief that you want to be included in that? Do you want to attach this brief as support for your implementation plan around this? And then if so, are there changes that you would see that might be needed to the brief, or additional information that you think might be helpful, anything like that we could work on. And this sort of leads us into our next steps, but at the December 1st meeting, the full task force meeting, I think there will be time allotted for work groups to work together on implementation plans. So it really is meant to capture what you've done around each recommendation and what next steps are. So we can send that to you all ahead of time as a draft for you to review. But we would be working on that, knowing that these implementation plans are going to be part of the final report for that's due, I think, December 31st. So I know we've all been waiting on this information for a while, so I just wanted to make sure we capture what you think is important for those items.
Couple things I think I would put together. Recommendations not even submitted to the committee till end of the year. Then a recommendation comes out from the committee early part of next year. I know it was mentioned earlier. I wish it weren't the case. I don't see any budget movements till next year at this point, to the next fiscal year, which I think may kind of move us to some consolidations of these 5 steps of, is it time to ask for the first 2 to be kind of combined into one, that we consider what we should do maybe in the 3rd step with a 2025 market increase we've not even seen yet. But by the time if we do these year by year, we'll clearly be well past that, kind of before it's coming in. But the nature of these recommendations, I think, are fine. I just think the timing may require some consolidations of them. I also think that we had briefly mentioned what is happening to child care centers. I think a progression of that over the last couple of years and a forecast over the next couple of years without these changes are going to be a big part of the selling points. I don't know that I could say, and I don't have the numbers up here, but that a $200 million state investment for a $225 million increase in GDP changes the conversation. It's important to know, it's important to see it's a positive for what we're doing, but I think you're going to have to pair that with what's happening to child care centers, what we're losing kind of in the market, what we anticipate these changes may do towards stopping that decline, those kind of things. But again, I think step number 1 would almost be to say, and heaven help us that we get there, in the budget that's coming July 1st of next year, what should be the proposed changes? More than a 5-step process, which if I put that over years puts us to 2030 before we get there, still doing the 2023 rate floor. But I think there's a lot to kind of implement on there, but I think that's kind of the timeline. And I think we need to look at it as each one of those stops could occur on a start for a new fiscal year.
That is extremely helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree with everything Senator Heiss just said. I think the only, I guess, a couple of things that I would add is that, to me, one thing that is really important is it seems like we are coalescing around the concept of moving to the true cost of care as what we're benchmarking against, as opposed to this kind of very loose system that doesn't make sense with 3,000 rates. So I think that, like, to me, that is a top line recommendation, is that we need to be moving towards true cost of care as the benchmark. And I agree about the consolidating for next steps. When you're talking about tracking the child care centers, I also really want to flag that I think the family child care homes being the places where we're losing people or losing providers at the most rapid rate, making sure that we're also tracking that. as well. And then I guess the one other piece is that I do, I know I'm a broken record, but I do feel an urgency to make sure that we don't leave 6 to 12-year-olds behind in this. And so if we're looking at, June of next year is a time that we're really talking about the next phases, that hopefully we can talk about looking at what the analysis of bringing those folks along as well would look like and what that would add.
All great points. Anything else we should make note of?
Kimberly, I wondered if we have any policy angle that we've left untouched that we should consider. So is there anything that could be done without a budget impact? We see the necessity of the budget and then appropriations increase and change, but are there anything around, some of you may be following a thread nationally with an early childhood policy forum on subsidy and some of the key components, and just thinking through contracts versus vouchers, attendance, enrollment, that angle. And there are several other kind of that you think of as key ingredients to a highly functioning subsidy system. Neil and Leanne, are they addressed at all in here?
No, this mainly focuses on the kind of budgetary fiscal subsidy investment side of it.
Okay, yeah.
Only other thing that comes to mind for me is the in terms of the methodology that Leanna and Neil provided us, is the amplification perhaps of the economic impact. And I am curious though, is that, and maybe I'm asking you, Senator Hayes, are those types of figures, how compelling are they to legislators, and are they should that be kind of amplified in our recommendations as well, and as we think to the future?
No, I think they're important. I think they're part of the argument. I also classify them as the biggest lies ever told to the General Assembly. There has been no spending ever proposed to the General Assembly that will not return massive dividends to the state economy and those type of things. As I've said, it is the biggest lie starts with for every dollar spent, you will receive, because we had, even back to program evaluation, have done a lot of evaluation of those, and almost none of them come to the economic forecasting. That's separate for the economic issues. But I think the difference is that there is an economic story that any investment can tell. There is a personal story here and a community needs and impact story that can only be told here. And so that's why I think that needs to be the focus to members of General Assembly, because what you don't want is to be compared to, if you limit it to an economic argument, it's very simple to say, for somebody to come along and say, oh, but if you invested your money here, we would show a greater economic impact. Therefore, you need to put all your funds in a new highway to an IBM center, or whatever the question may be. It's important to have, but the unique story that early childhood has and the unique impact that they have has to be the focus of our promotion.
Thank you.
And just as a note,
helpful.
I was going to say, just as a note, as you were talking, Senator Hayes, I think in the next few months, we can definitely get that forecasting for you pretty effectively.
Okay, well, we have about a minute left. Any other thoughts? We, um, so I think you may have received a blank copy of our implementation plan. Essentially, it's going to identify the background, challenge, strategy, impact, action steps, and how we're going to implement each recommendation and what the evaluation of that might look like for success. So this is a form all the work groups are using for all of their recommendations. I think there will be varying levels of detail for our 2 recommendations. So, we've done a lot of exploration around the endowment fund. And so it may be just identifying what are the next steps for that. For this, I think we can use some of the conversation today and this brief to support the implementation plan for the statewide floor. So if everyone is okay with this, we will draft these, send it to you ahead of the December 1st meeting, and we will use our time during that meeting to revise it together, make any adjustments, and just keeping in mind, what do we need to note for that report in December? And I do think it can be, what is your next steps as a work group? It could also be, this is a firm recommendation. So there may be a little bit of both in ours. Any questions or concerns about any of that?
I just have one clarification, and I might have missed this. I was looking back at the executive order. The report is due at the end of December, but the task force continues on. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
Yes.
yes,
Through
okay.
March 2027. So we have this report due. We will have another report due December 2026, and then we'll have 3 more months, unless it's otherwise continued.
Perfect. Thank you.
I do think this work group has done an enormous amount of work since August. I think you'll be pleased with the level of detail that we have in the implementation plans. And again, thank you so much to Leanna and Neil and NC Child for pulling together all of this great information. If you guys have additional thoughts as you review that draft that I emailed, just let us know, and we'll be sure to relay that to them. But thank you for your time today. I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
guys.
Thank you all.
so much
NC
for doing
Child.
this.
Thank you. All right.